Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema Podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com, as well as the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. Click subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, or the YouTube channel, where you can also get first quick takes of movies that I've watched, sometimes because of the fact that I don't necessarily feel like I've got a lot to say on them, but I do have enough to say that I want to discuss them. You can also check us out at patreon.com/SonicCinema. There you'll get content from film festivals, Dragon Con, and all sorts of other stuff. So this is probably going to be the last episode of 2025, and fittingly enough, it is the fifth episode in my look this year on fascism in cinema and the idea of how cinema has reflected moments of authoritarianism, of how it reacts to societal issues at the time, and also how it colors our perception of certain things. And that is really kind of the case of this last episode. We are looking at the idea of action movies. It's actually our second one. I mean, we talked about Dirty Harry, The Running Man, and Dark Knight Rises in terms of the police state and state-sanctioned violence back in April. But this one is going to be looking at action films and how they color our perceptions of the politics of the time, the military and government agencies at the time. And joining me is a return guest. We just talked about Lord of the Worlds a couple of episodes ago. And please welcome me back to the podcast, Phil Faso. Phil, thank you very much for joining me.
Brian, always my pleasure to join you. How are you today?
I'm exhausted, but I'm doing well, thank you. This is one of those episodes, look, the fact of the matter is it is not a secret that when you portray the military in Hollywood, in movies or TV, that there is a very rigorous vetting process in terms of how realistic you can make it in terms of the United States government. It is very well known. There have been plenty of things that have discussed it. One of the things I didn't want to do with this episode is just discuss war movies, because, that I feel like is a completely different beast from what we're talking about. And with the rise of Ronald Reagan, and in the wake of Vietnam, in the wake of Watergate, in the wake of really feeling down on America after those institutional failures and political failures, what we saw in the Reagan era, and something that's continued to this day, just not necessarily to the same extent, is this idea of action movies that really are about making audiences feel good about America, feel good about government institutions. And that's kind of where this episode came from. This idea that movies can be propaganda even if they do not necessarily, even if they don't necessarily come directly from a governmental source, they can convey ideas that are very much in favor of the government, in favor of bringing a message that the government wants to put out there.
So if I can address that real quick, this is not something that started in the 80s. This is something that started way, way back. I mean, you can go back as far as the 1930s. So if you want to take a look at, you can take a look specifically at stuff like Leni Riefenstahl and the use of film for propaganda for the war machine in Germany. But even more importantly, I think in the light of the discussion we're having is to take a look at Laurence Olivier's Henry V, which basically his version of Henry V, which is, historically takes place in the 1400s. He films that in the late 30s when, England's under attack from Germany. And that is a direct response and a call for nationalism and a call for positivity about England's chances in the war. So
Right.
This is not a current thing. This is something that once people realized, hey, we can make films and mass produce them and put them out to hundreds of thousands or millions of people, we can use that to push messages. And even if, like you said, with these four movies we're going to talk about, none of them are state mandated. They're not documentaries. They're not pushed by any government, any governmental force. But certainly, at least the first three we're going to talk about are just rampant causes for jingoism and nationalism and wave the American flag above everybody else in the world.
Oh, yeah. No. And look, I mean, yeah, that's not to say that America did not make propaganda films for decades before this, before the 80s. I mean, you brought up Leni Riefenstahl, you brought up Henry V, which that makes me even more curious to watch that version of that play from Olivier. But yeah, I mean, you look at, and of course, war movies have always had with them a sense of pitting one side against the other without really necessarily looking at the nuance of the battles that they're showing. I think the thing that I would say separates these films from that, other than the fact that they're not necessarily state sanctioned, is that it is one of the first time, for me, the reason the 80s is kind of the flashpoint for me is because of the fact that it's one of the first times we've really seen a concerted effort on Hollywood's part to bring politics and a very specific sort of politics into popular genres at the time, in particular the action movie, divorcing it from the military movie, the war movie. Now, I mean, two of these certainly, they skirt along that edge somewhat, but they're ultimately action fantasies of the time that they were made. And that's kind of where I was getting at with making the demarcation point in the 80s and the Reagan era.
Oh, yes, certainly. And I would say that those movies are a direct reaction to Ronald Reagan and the decade of the 70s in film, because the decade of the 70s was all about Nixon and government paranoia. All your thrillers back then were politically based. 3 Days of the Condor, The Parallax View. I forget the one about Woodward and Bernstein.
The President's Men, which we just discussed on the last episode.
Yeah, that I remember. I couldn't remember the name, but I know you covered that in the last one. And I think that it's important to realize that those movies were all questioning government
Yeah.
in the light of the Kennedy assassination, and in the light of what was going on with Nixon, and him being impeached and all those sorts of things going on. And then Reagan comes along, and everybody's pro America and pro government. And Reagan wants to install government everywhere. Reagan wants to install militarism. And all those sorts of things are being reflected in Hollywood, because now all that darkness and shadow that existed in the 70s is now being pushed out by a rah rah, here's my American flag.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this is also, I mean, one of the most defining aspects of the Reagan presidency from a propaganda point, from a nationalism point, is this was also the very tail end of the Cold War. And yes,
Yes.
certainly the Cold War was a part of the politics since post World War II and the 50s onward. But
Yep.
I feel like Reagan was probably one of the main presidents who really almost ran on the idea of anti-communism, even more than I would say Eisenhower did. I mean, Eisenhower certainly leaned into the anti-communism but message of the Cold War, but at the same time, I ultimately feel like he was also working more towards rebuilding America after the decades of the Great Depression and World War II, and continuing that more than he was pushing a virulently anti-communist message, which I think we definitely see much more in Reagan's presidency.
Certainly. Absolutely. And I think that Reagan came in, you have to remember the context of Reagan getting elected the first time was that the Iran Contra, the Iran, not the Iran Contra, the Iran hostage conflict was going on then. And he promised
Yeah,
that he was getting them out. So he got elected. Gas prices were down. Jimmy Carter was having all sorts of political. I don't want to get too involved in it, but I just do want to mention that, he comes in and day one, Iran releases the hostages, and now Ronald Reagan's this great American hero from his first day in office because he's got his flag and he's all pro-American. He's not going to let the communists stamp us out. He's not going to let the Iranians stamp us out. It's going to be all America. And we're going
yeah.
to be free. We're going to wave the flag, and everyone's going to have 5 credit cards and a pool in the backyard.
Hmm.
But I digress. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. And I mean, I think, and another thing that this is like from a cinemax standpoint, let's also, you mentioned the conflict, the disparity between this and the films of the 70s, the political films of the 70s, but this is also, we are also in a post Star Wars, post Superman, post Jaws.
We're in the age of the blockbuster now. We're in the
Yeah,
age
we're in the age of
where
the blockbuster, and we're also in the age of spectacle was king at
absolutely.
in movies. And I think to a certain extent this is, and I think what we see, especially in these films, even the last one, which is a bit different in terms of tone, but certainly I think keeping in the idea of some of these films that we see. It looks, one of the things that's interesting about these movies is that they're all reactions to that Cold War paranoia. And whether it's the source material in something like Sum of All Fears or the three films from the 80s specifically, they're all a product of Cold War paranoia, propaganda, jingoism, however you want to call it. And it's fascinating to see the ways in which they're very similar, even if the way they approach it is very different. And let's go ahead and get started with that. And we have 4 movies on this one. And part of the reason we've got 4 movies on this one is because the first 2 are part of one of the most iconic franchises of the 1980s. It started off in 1982 with First Blood, and then it progressed into the films we're going to cover today, Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Rambo 3. And these films all have Sylvester Stallone as John Rambo, who is a Vietnam veteran who in First Blood struggled with life outside of the military, and he finds himself on a side of, basically finds himself ostracized by the small community that he is that he walks into, and he's hunted. And it's one of those things where he just is forced to do things he really did not want to do at that time. In Part 2 and 3, these movies have a very familiar shape in terms of, it's essentially, in both cases, it's kind of getting Rambo out of retirement and back into doing things for the government, and for, in particular, Troutman, Richard Crenna's character, who was his handler, we come to realize, in Vietnam. And I'll be honest, this was my first time watching. I watched all 3 of them, even though we're only talking about Part 2 and 3, because I had never seen these Rambo movies. I had seen the 4th one in Thailand they directed in 2008, but I hadn't seen the 3 from the 80s. So it was really fascinating to watch these for the first time and just kind of see what started that template.
So what interests me is that the second one and after, everything after, just follows. It's such a severe left turn from the first one. So Rambo, at the beginning of the first movie, goes and he's looking for an old friend of his, and he finds out that some old lady's there, and she tells him that the guy died. And the way I took it is he probably died from, after effects of Agent Orange when he was in Vietnam. So Rambo is now, he's bereft of anywhere to go. So he's just walking through this town, and then this sheriff doesn't like the way he looks. The sheriff doesn't like the way he acts, and he basically tells him to hop in the cop car, drives him to the fucking edge of town, and says, "Get lost, don't come back." Mm-hmm. And then Rambo turns around and goes right back because he's an American. He fought for America. Why is he being treated like the enemy, right? And this escalates into Rambo having to basically go to war with a small town. Mm-hmm. So that's a real, and the whole thing is, it's not like the other ones. I mean, this is not like, hey, go America. This is everything I've ever heard and read about this, the reaction to people coming back from Vietnam. Like, I had relatives that came back, and they were never the same. I mean, that was long before I was born, around the time I was born, But, they were different people from what I was told, responded to things.
Yeah.
Spoke about the war, the horrible things over there. But then they came back, and they're being treated like they're the enemy, Right. All they did was what they were told to do, which is what every American who's ever gone to war for the country has been told to do. And there's this backlash against Vietnam vets. And that movie is totally a reaction to that. And it's written, it's based on a book by David Morello. It was written in the 70s, so it makes more sense to have that sensibility. Yeah. So when you get to the second one, and it's like, okay, so Rambo at the end of the first one, he's going to jail for a long time. He killed a bunch of people in this town. And the second one starts off with his handler Troutman going to jail to talk to Rambo about basically coming out of jail. He's like, I'm going to get you out. We're going to give you commendations, a second pub park. You'll be free and all that. But the thing is, we have these vets in Vietnam that are, still imprisoned there, and you have a chance to go get some of them out. And the most telling statement about that entire movie, and I think everyone that follows in this franchise, is when Rambo says to Troutman, "Do we get to win this time?" And I find that statement to be really powerful because I don't think he's just talking about the Vietnam War, but I'm also thinking about he's talking about his reflection on what happened in the last movie. Do I get to win this?
Yeah.
Do we get to go ahead and have that peace that the war is over? Because it clearly hasn't been over for him since he left Vietnam and in the second and third movies, right? And then Troutman's response is really it's really telling because he says to him, "That's up to you. Depends on what you're going to go and do." But then the movie turns into like, okay, so we're going to win Vietnam because Rambo is going to get eight captured POWs out of Vietnam. Like,
Yeah.
he's going to have his own mini Vietnam where he wins at the end because he's Rambo and rah rah America, right?
Well, the thing is, it's like this is, and it is important to put into context the fact that Vietnam at the time was the most deeply hated war that that America has ever been part of. Like the first two world wars made a lot of sense, very black and white morality. Korean War, I mean, it's a byproduct of the Cold War, start of the Cold War. Vietnam starts that way, but the longer we go, the deeper we get into it, the more unpopular it becomes because it is a war it's the first real war that is televised. And so we start to see the horrors of war in a way that goes beyond newsreels and the movies that had been made at the time. So, it was at the time, I don't know if it still is. I mean, the war on terror and the Iraq war and stuff like that certainly have given it a run for its money, as far as how deeply unpopular they are. And that, for some reason, that extended to the veterans because of the fact that, they were looked at as baby killers. They were looked at as just, almost hired hands to a certain extent. And I think that is one of that is important context for First Blood, and it's part of the reason it's so compelling because that context is there. But at the same time, and so when part two comes along, and you've got to make a part two at this point because the first one was popular, it is one of those things where something is going to have to change in the franchise. And the second one was directed by George Cosmatos, who is his second film he directed that we're covering this year. We previously covered Tombstone this year with my friend Dawn. And this is also a movie that had James Cameron write a draft of the script starting out. And this movie, and he was famously working on this script, and it got around town. Cannon basically blatantly ripped it off with Chuck Norris and made the Missing in Action movies, and which both came out first before First Blood Part 2 even hits theaters. But yeah, First Blood Part 2 is still a huge hit because it's Stallone. This is his second most known character after Rocky Balboa, and it's honestly, it has production value that the Norge films don't have for canon, and we'll get to that more in after we talk about the Rambo movies. But also, it just has Stallone, and he at this point really seemed to understand the importance of star power and the importance of what it means to be a movie star in movies. And you saw that in the Rocky movies. You definitely see that in the Rambo sequels as well.
Well, look, the name Rambo becomes iconic after Rambo 2.
Yeah.
And it's referenced in 1,000 movies. People still make references to it in movies, and even if you don't know the source material, you know what being called Rambo is supposed to represent. So again, it's kind of funny. My friend Chris, his favorite actor of all is Sylvester Stallone, and he always brags about how Sylvester Stallone and Harrison Ford are basically the only two actors, according to him, that have two iconic roles in Hollywood. Because obviously you have Indiana Jones and you have Han Solo, and then on the other side with Stallone you have Rambo and you have Rocky Balboa.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because we'll talk about Rambo 3, but when we do that, I believe that scene came out at the same year as I think Rocky 3 was the one. No, I think that Rambo 3 was the same one that came out the same year as Rocky 4. And I think that Rocky 4, if you look at it, is even more jingoistic and nationalistic than the Rambo.
Oh God, yes. No, actually, Rocky 4 came out the same year as First Blood Part 2 because both of those movies are 40 this year. But
Okay,
no,
that
yeah.
makes sense,
I mean, there could be an entire episode on Rocky 4. I mean, but yeah, no, that is. I mean, no, that would have been perfect for this episode because of it. Really gets to a lot of the points that I want to make with this episode. But the fact of the matter is, it's not a typical action movie the same way that these are. So. That's why I didn't necessarily think to.
No, that's fine. I understand. I just did want to bring that up because Rocky and Rambo are not just icons as far as film icons. They become American icons at this point. They become symbols for America. They become, hey, we can win as ridiculous as it sounds, we can win Vietnam even though we lost it 10 years ago, and we can beat the Russians because of Sylvester Stallone. And the whole thing is just absurd. So I like the fact that you brought up the word fantasy before. Rambo 2 is very grounded in its reality, and so is Rambo 3, right? But they're fantasies. They're wishful fulfillment.
Yeah.
They're, hey, Rocky and Rambo single-handedly can beat anybody, any country. They can knock down entire countries, And it's just so ridiculous that the things that Americans en masse will buy into sometimes, And don't get me wrong, I think that Stallone's doing a fine job. You actually get some character progression from First Blood to First Blood Part 2. He talks a little more, you get to know a little more about him, And then the third one, I think the problem with the third one, one of the problems with the third one is that he talks a little too much. He's a little too jokey too. I don't really picture him as a comedian, but
no.
But again, these movies are pressing an issue. They're pressing an agenda here. They're pressing Reaganism in a microcosm.
Yeah.
Hey, we're the world beaters. We can beat anybody. Iran Contra, whatever. We can get past that. Reagan can do anything he wants because he's going to knock down the wall.
Yeah, and it is all about selling that America will win the Cold War. Which, I
Of
mean,
course.
we kind of did, but the fact of the matter is, it's like we will beat the Russians in the Cold War, you know. And the fact of the matter is, but the truth is, this basically gets to the point, to your point of the inherent silliness of part two and part three is that Rambo personally will defeat the Russians. It's not so much that and communism. It's not so much that America will defeat communism. It's Rocky will. And I mean, you know, or Rambo will. But I mean Rocky's kind of that's part of what makes Rocky 4 so hilarious is that it's like Rocky's going to end the Cold War by, you know, going toe to toe with Ivan Drago. And it's like in Russia, and he will get them on his side. And it's like, what are we doing here, folks? It's just inherently silly.
The fact that there's a guy he's clearly supposed to be playing Gorbachev, and he's at the Rocky fight, and then he ends up cheering Rocky's win at the end, and it's a standing ovation. It's like, this would never happen.
No, it wouldn't.
We're sworn enemies at this point. And his whole speech at the end with if I can come in here and I can fight and I can, whatever, blah, 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 and I can be friends, we can be friends, and we can end this thing. It's like, okay, so Sylvester Stallone single-handedly thinks that Rocky's going to end the Cold War. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, in this one, it's like, look, with the Rambo movies, it's like, I think the reason First Blood Part 2 still kind of works as a movie is because of the fact that it feels like there are real personal stakes for Rocky. It's not just about, can we get out of Vietnam, and can he get out of Vietnam in the end? Can he win in the end? It's also, he can set his demons aside, and he can leave his demon instead of been keeping him at, that he's been trying to keep at bay since Vietnam once and for all, by getting these POWs out. And I think...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I think that's an interesting idea in First Blood Part 2. The problem is it follows so much of the same basic ideas that a lot of these action movies did at the time, where it is completely cliched writing, single-minded characters, really dopey dialogue in action sequences, and ultimately a message at the end that really goes off the rails quite hard. And I think Rambo 3 is worse in this respect, but at the same time, I mean, part 2 definitely is the start of this in this franchise.
So here's the thing, right? Okay. I like Rambo as a character. I always have. I think that if you want to look at Stallone's actual acting, because Sylvester Stallone and Rocky 2 put some superb acting into those movies, right? That's before he became a cartoon, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at I would say that First Blood is the best acting he's ever done, right? I like the character here, and I understand the character's machinations of what the character is trying to do here. Okay?
Yeah.
And I understand that Troutman is trying to get him out of jail. I understand that because Troutman he thinks that, that somehow Rambo's been wronged by what's happened here, right? Okay, so I get all that, right? But then you get the whole thing with so he's not actually supposed to be going in to rescue anybody. He's supposed to go it's supposed to be an empty camp, right? And he's supposed to just take pictures.
Yeah.
So there's proof that first off, which I don't think makes any sense because I don't know, maybe I missed this. I watched it again last night. I watched Rambo 3 again this morning. I watched them when we talked about this months ago, but I just wanted a quick refresher. So I've seen all four of these movies that we're going to talk about within the last week and a half. But tell me if I'm wrong on this. Does Rambo even have a camera with him?
I don't remember. It's been a few months since I've watched
I
First
don't
Blood
think I
Part
ever
2,
see
but
a
yeah, I don't
camera
think so.
in his hands. I see a bow and arrow.
Yeah.
No, I see a really awesome looking double sided knife that would do some damage, but I don't see a camera anywhere. Anyway, so he's supposed to go in, and then he's got this. He meets this contact who he realizes is a woman, a very beautiful woman who lives there. Her father was, involved in this underground thing that's going on. She's his contact there, and he goes in and he finds out that the camp isn't empty. So even though he should just be taking pictures and bringing them back, he decides he's going to go get one of these guys out, and he's going to try to rescue the entire group of these POWs because, hey,
Yeah.
he was tortured, and if there are flashbacks in the first movie of him being tortured and humiliated, and because he was a POW in the war before he got out, right? So, long story short, he ends up breaking one of these guys out, and then he's supposed to meet his contact point, and then we'll get into Charles Napier's character in a second, but Napier's character, who's in control of his mission, tells the guy who's flying the copter, he says, pull out, leave him there, right? So I get all that. I get Rambo's desire to fucking save these guys, totally. I understand
Yeah.
all that. The whole thing with Charles Napier's character is where I run into my bigger issues with this movie, right? So this guy is like a ghost agent. I don't know what he is. I guess he works for the military. I don't know. Does he work for the military or the CIA? I don't know exactly who he works for. Napier. I know that he's in control of this mission. So his thing is that he just wants to take pictures so he can send them over to Congress, and then Congress will say there are no POWs left. We don't need to do anything about this, right?
Yeah.
No one wants
Yeah.
a second war in Vietnam at this point, right? Okay. So Charles Napier's character has a discussion with Troutman. He keeps overruling Troutman during the course of this thing, and I'm surprised because Troutman is hanging around. I don't know why Troutman's hanging around after all this goes down, where they left Rambo. So Charles Napier's character has a discussion. It's a heated discussion with Troutman, where Troutman says, "Hey, you know what? We were going to pay the Vietnamese government to get these vets out, to get the POWs. There's 20,000, I think he says, or something like that, that are probably still in war camps there, right?" And then Napier's thing was, well, his argument is, well, we weren't going to pay off terrorists. That would be a bad sign. Then everyone would be taking advantage of us. So Napier is clearly your villain here,
Yeah.
right? But then you have the other side where you have there's the Vietnamese guys who are trying to kill Rambo, and then there's this Russian. So
Yeah.
apparently, in that year in Sylvester Stallone movies, you couldn't make a movie without a Russian enemy. That's the big deal, right? Okay. So the Russian is in charge of what's going on the ground. So Rambo's being pulled in two different directions because looks like his country still doesn't want him. They're going to abandon him in Vietnam, which that stuff plays perfectly off the first film, I think.
Yeah.
But then you get the whole thing with the torture scene and him speaking into the microphone. It's like, Murdoch, I'm coming for you as he's being tortured. I'm like, this is just ridiculous. Like, I get the setup. I get all that stuff, and I get Rambo's character. But then you have these extended scenes where he's running all over these villages, and he's all of a sudden it turns into a typical. I wouldn't say a dumb action movie because I think it's got a little higher ambition than that. But I would say it turns into a very generic action movie with a bunch of stuff blowing up, grenades being
Yeah.
thrown, fire being started, all that stuff. Heavy metal, heavy gunfire, helicopters, tanks, this and that and the other thing, right? And I think that's where it falters. And then when Rambo gets back at the end, he blows up he saves the vets, so he does that, right? So we got 8 guys out of Vietnam, so now Rambo's won the war, right?
Yeah.
So he's got those guys out, and then he goes into he actually, I think he hits, what's his name? The guy who plays Kreese in Karate Kid, Martin Cove. He hits
Yeah.
Martin Cove's character in the nuts with the butt of a machine gun. That had to hurt. And then he goes in and blows up all the screens and the computers and stuff. And then you think he's going to kill Napier's character. And he does the typical slam down the knife right next to his head. And then he says, there are plenty of more people out there. You're going to go out and get them all free, or I'm going to come back for you. So you're going to come
Hmm.
back for them in Vietnam, or I'm going to come back for you. And then we're left off with Rambo just walking off into the distance because he's done now. He's satisfied his war, apparently.
Yeah.
So again, like the whole idea that Rambo is winning Vietnam by working with a dickhead government agent who he scared the hell out of, and he saved 8 vets as a microcosm is supposed to be us going, yeah, we won Vietnam now. Like that's the message that I'm getting out of that film. Don't get me
Well,
wrong.
okay, and here's where I think that is it gets to the messy politics of these films, right?
Yeah.
But I think where your description is ultimately leading this story is the fact that the basic idea is, and look, with Reagan, with conservatives in the Reagan era, this is really where you start to see the idea of small government, of government is too big, it's government is getting in the way of you living your life. And that I feel like that is the type of message that we're supposed to get with Napier's character. Troutman and Rambo are doing this for their own moral code in a lot of ways. I mean,
Yeah.
Troutman is still part of the government, but he's a good part of the government. He's Reagan in a way, where it's
Yeah.
like he's trying to rein government in. And I think the fact of the matter is, it's like you look at Napier's character, and the whole idea I think is that's like, well, is his character is representative of the American government not really caring about the
Yes. 100%.
average person. And I think that plays such an important role into why Rambo 2 and Rambo 3 were as successful as they were. It's this whole idea of the government cannot be trusted, only the main hero can be trusted. Only the hero can be trusted. Like, only I can do what the government cannot do or doesn't want to do for you.
Because
And
instead of government overreach, which is, basically if Napier's character were to say, go in Vietnam, if he would have let Rambo clear those guys out, that would be government overreach, right?
yes,
Okay. So instead of doing that, he goes conservative and pulls out and leaves the whole thing is they tell Rambo in both these movies, hey, if you get caught, we never heard of you, right?
yeah,
So again, this is the American government selling out its people and saying, "Hey, we really don't care about you." But instead of government overreach, government pulls back and says, "Well, we're going to leave Rambo there. Screw him," right? So
yeah,
we're supposed to look at this and say, Napier isn't the true American here. Rambo is the true American. Like
yes,
this is what I'm getting at. I understand. I totally see that side of it. I agree with that. I saw all that too. My main thing coming out of this is like, this is this is a studio trying to say that, hey, America is still a good place, even though Vietnam happened, and we turn on all people because Rambo went back, and basically there's hope for the however many thousands of POWs are still there. Which realistically, I mean, we know there's not, but again, like we said, it's a fantasy. And if
Yeah.
you want to live the fantasy for an hour and 30 minutes, good on you. You know, I understand. Look, I don't think it's a bad movie. I actually enjoyed both Rambo 2 and Rambo 3. It's just that the politics get really thorny and outlandishly ridiculous, you know?
Oh, yeah,
And
completely.
and that's the whole thing, you know? You know,
Well, and it
good.
also doesn't help that these movies lean into a couple of things that I think a lot of action movies really leaned into in the 80s and 90s, that in really ugly stereotypes of anybody that wasn't American.
Oh, of course.
And I mean, you get that with the Vietnamese in this, you get that with the Russians in this, and you certainly
But you
get
also get a
that
little
with
bit with the
the
Russians with Podolsky in this one. He's the representative of their entire country. You
oh
know?
yeah,
So
and you get with
not only do you have
yeah.
Vietnam is bad in here, now you have, but we'll throw in some Russians just into the cocktail just to make it particularly nasty for anyone who's not American.
Well, and it's also a reminder of, oh yeah, the Vietnamese ultimately were not our enemy. The Russians were our enemy in Vietnam. That's the important thing you got to remember.
Yeah.
Vietnam was not necessarily about Vietnam. It was about the Russian. It was about the Russians. And I mean, I think that is I think that's another part of it that, and again, it's where you get into this being Cold War propaganda, where it's the whole idea of, oh, it's us versus Russia, it's Rambo versus Russia, and I mean, you get that a little bit in Rambo 3 as well, because both of these movies, and Rambo 3 takes place in the Middle East,
Yes.
and so with the Iraq-Iran war, and so he gets caught in there, and yeah, he is somebody he is somebody who is very much sent in to help the Afghans to fight off the Russians in Rambo 3. And I will
So it's
say
interesting. It's
we get
interesting because at the beginning of Rambo 2, Troutman comes to get him out of jail, right?
yeah,
Because he's obviously been incarcerated. He's working on a chain gang pretty much. Rambo 3 starts off in Thailand, I believe, with I may not be Thailand. It's in the Middle East, I think. He shows up and Rambo is stick fighting as somebody, and beats the crap out of the guy, and then goes back to a monastery, right? So Troutman goes to press this new mission on Rambo in this monastery, right?
yeah,
So at this point, Rambo obviously is an expatriate. He's no longer living in America. And from the sounds of it from Rambo, he doesn't want to go back at this point. He's happy living
yeah.
a peaceful life. He's found some kind of peace. The war machine inside him is over after what happened in Rambo 2. So am I wrong in thinking that Troutman's kind of a dick in this one? Because Rambo is like, hey, listen, the Troutman comes and says, hey, I need to go back, right? I'm going in personally on this mission in Afghanistan, and I want you to come with me, right? And Rambo says, look, I'm done with my war. And then Troutman goes into this whole thing about, hey, man, you're never going to be really done with your war. You're a war machine from the inside out, and there's no peace ever for you. So come join me. Like, it sounds like kind of a dick move to me the way he puts it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and this is part of this is also the era of special ops, of black ops missions, and covert operations, right, in other parts of the world that we don't really have much jurisdiction in, but because of the fact that we were trying to quote unquote keep the world safe from keep the world safe for democracy, it is one of those things where it's like, we felt like we had to go into places and take care of the rest of the world, even if we didn't necessarily have any business doing there. again, this is all about being back the Russians. This is all about being back communism. This is both of these movies are both virulently anti-communist propaganda and anti-Russia propaganda. It's what it is. I mean, it's just the fact of the matter is. But it also does speak to the changing time of American military ops. Like, this is much more covert, much more clandestine. It's not sending a unit off to war in front of the cameras. This is about doing something a little bit stealthier. It doesn't end that way because it's Rambo and it's an action movie. But the fact of the matter is, it's something that really gets to. It's something that really gets to this idea of this is the changing landscape of how America is fighting war. And we get more stereotypes here. We get more sneering Russian officers in this one. And this does start to show us something of what war in the Middle East is going to be like in 15 years. And, you know, it's going to be. And this is Rambo 3, even more so than Part 2, is all about the one-man army, the macho action. This is all about, one person can do this. Now, granted, he inspires the villagers to help out, but at the same time, it's like he is very much the impetus of the action in this movie.
Well, it's kind of funny because the first one is all him acting on his own. The second one, they put the girl in there as his contact, and she's the one who gets him. You know, she's the one who actually saves him when he's being tortured. And he has a brief moment with her, and I think I understand why this was put in there. Because he has that brief moment with her where she's like, saying, hey, you know, you take me back to America. I think I'm going to love America. And he smiles and he's like, yeah, sure. And then they kiss, and I'm like, this just seems really weird for Rambo. But then I took it in a different context and said, this is the only time, like in this entire series, that you see Rambo have any kind of joy in life. And then 5 seconds later, she gets blown away. So it's like his destiny since he stepped foot in Vietnam is probably basic training in America before he even set foot in Vietnam was to be just a miserable fucking person living his own personal hell.
Yeah.
And that's pretty terrifying. But in the third one, so they try to humanize him with the kid, but the kid is just annoying, right? As most kid actors are, by the way. But the kid is like, I want to go. Rambo keeps saying it's not safe, and the kid keeps going anyway.
Yeah.
So they try to do that, and then he rouses up the other guys. But basically, like, even with that, he's, like you said, the engine for the entire thing. Like, none of this is going to happen if Rambo doesn't show up there, right? Like, the communists still going to be, you know, torturing people and killing people or whatever. They probably would have killed Troutman at some point because Troutman's never going to he's never going to say anything against America or sell him a job.
Right.
How do you feel about it becoming like the last 25, 30 minutes like a buddy movie with him and Troutman?
It's like I did actually like that dynamic. I like that dynamic. And obviously it wouldn't have worked unless we'd seen the way that relationship between the two develops over the previous two movies.
Yes.
The fact that they're very much like there is I agree with you. He's really putting the hard sell on Rocky at the beginning of this, but there is a mutual respect between the two. And I think that's where I do think that's where the ending of this, other than that absolutely backcrap crazy cave sequence in Rambo 3, it it's where this movie really does actually, to your point, like these movies are entertaining, but you look at them 30 years, almost 40 years removed, and you really do see how ridiculous they are.
Rambo kills the main Russian by driving his tank into the guy's helicopter.
I mean, you know,
Even my friend Chris, who loves these movies, he loves Rambo 3, but he says that ending is absolutely ridiculous. There's no way you can. And
yeah,
I think the most interesting message I get out of this at the end is, obviously the Afghans are all like, okay, we're going to fight. We're going to continue to, now Rambo showed us we can do things for ourselves here. We're going to fight the commies. And then as they're getting ready to drive off, Troutman and Rambo, Troutman says to him, I think we're getting a little soft. And Rambo says, yeah, maybe just a little. And those are the last lines of the movie. But I think that by getting soft, Troutman doesn't mean like they're not badasses, they're not military killers and soldiers and all that. He means that they're being soft and now they can sympathize a little with people, whereas maybe it was just the mission before. Now it's the
yeah,
people that the mission is going to affect.
yeah, exactly.
That's how I read that.
No,
So
I think that's a pretty good read on it too. And I mean, yeah, you do see Rambo open it up a bit more in each of these films. And I mean, you brought up the romantic subplot, whatever that was in part two, and yeah, I mean, it's good because it gives him a sense of happiness briefly, but the fact that they undercut it by having her die so quickly after that is just absurd. And it's like you basically negate everything you wanted to do with that idea.
yeah, but I don't. I'm telling you, I don't see it that way because I see it as this guy can't have any joy in life. Like he's a killer
Yeah,
machine. That's what he is now. And that's basically what Troutman tells him. Hey, listen, you can't live any kind of life with peace because there are still missions out there for you. That's what he says to him in
yeah,
the monastery. And Rambo. I mean, we're not going to talk about the fourth one, but the fact that one was made so many years later, and then Last Blood was made what 5, 6 years ago.
yeah.
And now they're I don't know how this is going to work. Like this whole Rambo, I'm not interested in this Rambo prequel at all that they're going to make with some other actor now because that's Sly Stallone's character. You know,
I mean, what? Yeah, and I think I asked you when that news came out. It's like, isn't First Blood literally the prequel? Like, isn't that literally the origin story of the character? I mean, what are we doing? Unless you're actually going to show him in Vietnam, but even that, it's like, come on, what are we doing?
well, that's like the whole thing with the First Omen. The First Omen film in 1976 is the First Omen. It's the birth of him. Like, how can you go any further back? Like, it's a plot
Yeah,
twist and we don't need it. Like there are other stories to tell, and apparently, Hollywood can't get off, regurgitating the same stuff because Hollywood's been doing that for over 100 years now. So now we're going to get a new Rambo that I'm certainly not going to be invested in. So
no, no. I mean, especially without Stallone. I mean, granted, he's gone full in on MAGA at this point, but that's not a surprise. A lot of those actors from that era have been, if they weren't already. So
uh,
that certainly leans. That certainly is the case with the star of our next movie, which is another action hero of the age and one we've actually already talked about. That is Chuck Norris. And we are going to be talking about his 1985 movie Invasion USA.
hey, one more thing
So,
to wrap up. I do have to say, if you watch Rambo 2, First Blood, if you watch I forget the title, Rambo First Blood 2, make sure to watch the end credits because it's a banger song over those, and it's the only song I ever know that has co-written by Jerry Goldsmith and Frank Stallone.
Oh
And that
yeah.
alone makes it worth a listen.
Oh, we haven't even. Yeah, we didn't even talk about Goldsmith. There's some pretty great Goldsmith music in these movies.
Yeah, I didn't mention
I
him because I figured we were going to talk about him in Sum of All Fears and just talk about all three movies then with that. So,
Oh yeah, we can definitely do that. But no, I mean, no, the songs at the end of each of the Rambo movies are just bonkers. But but I mean, they're quintessentially '80s power ballads too. And you know what?
yes, they are.
I have a soft spot for that. You know, one thing I do not have a soft spot for is Chuck Norris, though. And, you know, it's like when we talk about this type of movie, when we talk about action movies that push a political message, a lot of people's natural inclination is to go to John Milius's 1984 movie Red Dawn. And certainly that movie is iconic. It's goofy as hell, but it's iconic. The reason we're not talking about here is because it seemed very obvious for this discussion. And
I
I
thought,
want to and I a few years ago I have a set of Canon films, and Missing in Action is in there, and Invasion USA is in there. And I watched Invasion USA a couple of years ago and just was like, this is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, seen. And but the reason I wanted to do Invasion USA more than Red Dawn isn't because I think it's a better movie. It's not. I think John Milius does a good job with Red Dawn. But it gets to this whole idea of America is not safe in the 1980s, even though, like, nobody is, even when you take into consideration 9/11, other terrorist attacks, and then obviously Pearl Harbor, nobody's ever attempted a takeover of America in terms of what's being on display in Red Dawn and Invasion USA. Red Dawn, I think, is interesting because it's a group of teenagers doing it, but Invasion USA, it fits more in the vein of what we're seeing with the Rocky movie, with the Rambo movies, in that it's a one-person battle against these attackers. And honestly, this is just a dumber version of Red Dawn in every way, shape, or form.
so see, I thought that you picked this movie because we tend to talk about trash, you and I, a lot, and I figured you needed to throw some trash in this. And this
I mean,
movie,
that's part of it too. I mean, that is part of it too. Let's look.
so
We've
this movie is trash. Okay, this
yeah.
movie, first off, I think it's like an hour 45, hour 50 long, and there
It's
is
longer than both of the Rambo movies we just talked about.
yes, because you talked about this after you watched the second and third one. Rambo and Rambo 2 get in, they do their business, and they get out. Rambo
Yeah.
2 is like an hour and 35 minutes, and the second one, the third one's an hour and 40 minutes. This is before Hollywood bloat where everything has to be 2+ hours, right? Okay?
Yeah.
So this movie is absolutely absurd. First off, we begin and again, I got to be honest with you and your audience here. Like when you first approached me with this, I was like, look, I don't like talking politics. I really don't. It's not fun. It's not this and that. But then when you put it in the frame of, hey, we can talk about action movies, and then I'm like, well, there's some thematic stuff. There's some stuff we can talk about. I don't need to get too political there. But when I'm watching this opening scene in 2025, a week and a half ago, and I see a boatload of, immigrants trying to get to somewhere, I guess America, right? And somebody
Yeah.
pulls up in a Coast Guard ship, and they're like, yay, we're saved. And then they proceed to pull out guns and blow the fuck out of everybody on board. I'm like, this couldn't be more 2025 if it were made this year, right?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
and no, you're absolutely right. And the funny thing is, it's like we can talk about it a little bit more when we talk about some of All Fears, but like it's funny because of the fact that yeah, I didn't think about the timeliness of this when it comes to what we're seeing in terms of what's going on with Venezuelan ships and the what the Navy is doing in terms of destroying alleged drug ships and all of that stuff. Or I mean, what is going on with when it comes to immigrants in general? And part of the reason I didn't quite connect that the way that you did is because of the fact that this is the villain that is killing this boatload of migrants. Like the invaders are doing the killing in this one. It's not necessarily the American government. So that's where that connection did not really resonate with me. But yeah, when
No,
you do think about it, it's that iconography where it's like, well, that certainly says something. And I mean, Clear and Present Danger starts in very similar, in a way, has similar ideas in it as well too. At the
sure.
beginning that lead to that, but we're not talking about Clear and Present Danger because I discussed that last year.
So
But
here's the thing, though. Like, if you haven't watched the trailers for this movie and you don't know that Richard Lynch is a bad guy in every movie that he's ever made, you don't know that he's not a U.S. Coast Guard captain
yeah,
until several. I think it's a scene or two later, right? So what you're witnessing is it looks like a U.S. Coast Guard captain having his crew slaughter immigrants who are trying to get somewhere. And then they go under the ship and they pull it up. And then I don't think that the immigrants knew that there was cocaine on the ship. They seemed like they
yeah,
just wanted to get ashore. But now there's cocaine on it. So now Richard Lynch's character, who's clearly Russian when we find out, brings this to a cocaine dealer or I don't know, someone high up on the cocaine chain and wants to get in contact with somebody, and then he kills that guy. So now, so now Richard Lynch has killed immigrants and drug dealers. So
yeah,
this guy in Trump times would be an American hero. This guy would be the hero of this movie if he weren't Russian, based on what I've seen from those first couple scenes. That's how I
yeah.
took that, and that's why I'm taking that in a modern context and just saying this is really weird. So, so go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry I jumped in there, but we need to get into Chuck Norris. We need to get involved with the 100 immigrants who are going to take over, 100 invaders who are from of multi nationalities. Can't tell what they are. Who are going to take over America by apparently taking out every small town in the state in the country. There's all
Yeah,
kinds of weird
exactly.
stuff going in this movie, Brian.
Oh my god. Like the politics in this movie is absolutely backcrack crazy. I mean, it is even more convoluted. I mean, say what you will about the Rocky movies. The Rocky movies at least have very straightforward political leanings. This is just bananas because to your point, like where is everybody in this movie from? Like how is all of this connected? It's like, okay, yeah, that's weird. Can we talk for a second about the woman? You brought up Richard Lynch's character killing people during a drug deal. Can we talk about the woman getting bloodied and killed because she was snorting coke at the wrong time? Because that
Yes,
was
we
an
can.
insane. That was insane collateral damage.
This clearly is an anti-drug message. Only it's
Yeah,
weird because I would swear that Menachem Golan on drugs his entire career running Canada. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But you look at the output and the stories I've heard about the guy, I would not be surprised if that were the case.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah, people are getting killed. So here's the thing: I read something. There's just so much to break down. I don't even know where to start. But I do want to start by saying that, okay, I was watching this and I'm like, this is just like, this isn't really a movie with a plot structure. This is just people getting killed. Then you go to a different location and it's different people getting killed. Then you go to a
Yeah.
different location and repeat and rinse, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I read somewhere that there was a much longer edit of this film where they were going to they had a whole bunch of plot connecting scenes and, exposition and stuff that would set up everything. And then Golden Globus decided, nope, we just want a bunch of killings in this. So I don't know if that's true or not, but that's certainly how this plays out.
I I mean, I don't want a longer version of this movie because of the
Okay.
fact that that would just be insufferable. But B, I mean, that would not surprise me just because of the fact that it is so disjointed. And I mean, honestly, look, I mean, Canon had an aesthetic. They had an aesthetic when it comes to their movies. You cannot argue that. And I mean, it makes sense. I mean, Chuck Norris. It's like, what is, we talked about Rambo in those two movies has a very clear cut character to him. What exactly is Chuck Norris's character? Is he like special ops? Is he just a guy who's driving around in a swamp who gets caught in all of this? I
I
can't.
think that he is special ops because the one guy who's supposed to be a government guy goes there and talks to him, right? And says,
Yeah,
look, we need you. And then Chuck Norris says, no, I'm not getting involved. It's the whole Rambo thing all over again. And then Richard Lynch's guys come on those power boats, those fan boats,
yeah,
and they kill his friend who apparently sells fireworks and frogs' legs, and now it's personal, right?
yeah,
Okay. But let me just sum up this movie in the best way I can. All right. So there's this, I guess, I don't even, can't even call it a subplot. There is this insufferable camera woman who is just everywhere, right?
yep,
Okay. So it's funny because I read Ebert's review. Anytime we do these, I don't read the review until after I rewatch the movie, and I hadn't seen this since the 80s, I'm pretty sure. So I'm watching this and I'm like, is she being assigned to all these places that these guys keep showing up with these guns and blowing everybody away? Is she there by coincidence? Is she on the, like, what is going on here? So,
yeah,
so they don't have time to have her ever set up a thing where she's at a newspaper office and the newspaper guy or editor or whatever is saying, hey, we think something's going to happen here, or hey, there's a cultural event here, go watch this or whatever. But they have time for like a 45-second scene where Chuck Norris is driving down a block and there's all these weirdos on the side of the street and they're all throwing stuff at his truck and they're all making faces and giving him the finger. And then they also have time for a 15-second scene of a woman walking a bottle of Perrier across a outside diner to drop it off at Richard Lynch's table. So you could have cut all that crap out, still made this an hour and 45 minutes, and made some sense of it with some connective tissue here and there, Brian.
yeah,
It is insane. I'm pretty sure that Chuck Norris's character is supposed to be some kind of special ops guy, right? And
yeah.
then he decided that once his frog leg selling friend gets killed, that it's time to go into action, and now he's going to save America. But let's talk about the invasion here real quick, okay? So we see a bunch of guys, right, show up. So Richard Lynch's character has his counterpart. That guy is, I believe, played by an Iranian, if I remember correctly from what I read, because I was looking up some of the nationalities of the cast people. Because normally when you have some kind of invasion, it's an invasion where a country is invading, right? Okay?
Yeah.
This does not seem to be that, okay?
No.
So the other guy, the Iranian, I believe he was guy, shows up at a beach, and again, you want to talk about just collateral damage with no sense at all. There's this couple making out on the beach, right? And then you say, okay, 5 minutes later from now, they're probably going to be having sex, right? So they're on the beach, and all of a sudden these bivouacs pull up with 100 guys of I guess dispersed nationalities is the best way I could put it. I don't even know how to put this. There's like guys there's white guys, there's black guys, there's little guys who look like they're Latino, there's guys who may be Middle Eastern. None of them are wearing uniforms. Some of them are wearing
Yeah.
camouflage pants. They're all wearing these different shirts and different styles of shirts and different colors. Some of them have headbands, some of them don't. Some of them wearing, baseball caps. And then Richard Lynch's partner there walks up to this couple who are making out and just blows them away. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
so did you do that because they're American? Did you do that because you thought they were going to run to the press and find the camerawoman who seems to be everywhere but here at this particular moment, right? I don't get any of this. So their plan, you see a scene, it cuts to a scene the next day, and you see like 50 U-Haul trucks lined up, right? And these
Yeah.
guys are hopping into these trucks. They're all running up to these trucks. First off, again, it would have been nice to see a scene where it was coordinated, where somebody set all this up, but we don't get all that because this is a Cannon film, right? So we get these guys running into the trucks, and then you hear, okay, Miami, Philadelphia, Las Vegas. So they're calling out names of big cities where obviously these trucks are going to be going. Because the idea is not that they're going to take on the military. They're somehow going to pretend to be the military in cases and sometimes pretend to be cops. And they're going to take down America, small town at a time, and turn America against itself, where America can't trust its cops and its military. This is the most convoluted, insane structure for an invasion I've ever heard in a movie. And we just covered War of the Worlds, Brian.
Well, and it's funny because of the fact that, I mean, isn't there a vengeance aspect to Richard Lynch's character as well when it comes to Norris?
Yes,
It's
because they have some
so
kind of
why
past
is he
connection.
going through? So why is he going through all this trouble then? Just go after Norris. Why do you have to invade the U.S.?
I have no idea, Brian, and I don't think
It's
anybody
like-
else knew either. I don't think
And-
the people who made this knew any of this.
Oh, no, no doubt.
Question.
No doubt. And I mean, the fact of the matter is the invasion officially does not start until 35 minutes in.
Yep.
And, that's always a good sign when it comes to it's always a good sign when it comes to an action movie when your inciting incident does not really happen until half an hour in.
Although I do
The
want to
suburbs are hit first, which, I mean, again, plays into fears of, they're going to be right in your backyard and all that stuff.
which is
we
50s
get-
paranoia with the Russians,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Goes right
and I
back
mean,
to
you
that.
you mentioned the boatload migrants that gets gunned down. We also have them impersonating police who go after minorities, which is, if that's not as on target of a
It's
of
timely, let's
a
put it that
meth
way, right?
timely aspect at this point. The fact of the matter is, it's like this movie is insane because of the fact that the reason this movie is insane, and I mean both movies are kind of crazy, but the reason this movie isn't more insane than Red Dawn is the idea that because of the fact that this is a group that is trying to go a little bit at a time. Like, there's no way this would get as far as it did. Because the first
No.
chance,
No.
like the National Guard's being put out, the military is going to be put out, and guess what? It's full within like a day. Part of the reason Red Dawn is so terrifying is because of the fact that it is. You can see that is a true sneak attack in the same way that Pearl Harbor was, in the same way that 9/11 was, where it's like you're just not ready for it. And, you know, this is something where it's like, how is it allowed to go on this long? It's like it would have been stamped out immediately.
The
Um,
CIA would have sniffed this out in like a day or two. By day
yeah,
three, all these little U-Haul trucks would have been pulled over. Everyone would have been arrested. You would have had some Americans getting killed, I'm sure, but you wouldn't have the mass. And remember, the onslaught that we're seeing is just what's happening in Florida, because this
yeah.
movie takes place in Florida. And by the way, be proud because part of this film was filmed in your current home state of Georgia. So be proud of
Oh, I
that.
know. Yeah, I know. It's funny. I saw there was an account that was showing like movies that were like scenes from movies and where they were actually filmed, what they look like in real life. And yeah, so I'm aware Atlanta had a part to play in this movie. You know, nobody said our film industry was great, but you know, it is robust over the years.
But hey, we
Um,
can take credit for this though. Last year, my last episode of the year with you was Bob Clark, and we talked Christmas movies. We talked The Christmas Story and Black Christmas, right?
yeah.
So if you go on and I hate this whole never-ending argument, and I don't take sides in it, and I don't really care if Die Hard's a Christmas movie or not. It's just a great movie. I don't give a shit if you think it's a Christmas movie because it's got Christmas trees in it. It takes place in December. I don't care if you don't because you think it's just an action flick. But if you're going by that lines of logic and asking those types of questions, you can ask that type of questions about this movie because not only is this place during Christmas, you get people setting up Christmas trees and lights and balls who get blown away by these invaders.
Oh yeah. Oh no, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, wow. I forgot about that. But yeah, I mean, look, for the record, Die Hard is a Christmas movie. It literally takes place on Christmas Eve, okay? Um, Invasion USA, I don't even. I feel like it's an insult to Christmas to call this a Christmas movie. Um, but the thing is, it's like this movie. But yeah, the reason I hope that in listening to our discussion about this movie, you're understanding why this one made more sense to talk about than Red Dawn did. Because Red Dawn, I do think, you know, it's as absurd as it is at times. It's also very well put together. It's also something that makes a lot of sense from a narrative standpoint, and from a sense of gathering fear. This one is just stupid. And this
Let
one
me
is
put it to you
just,
this way.
yeah,
Let me put it to you this way and tell you how I think of these two movies. Red Dawn is addressing some fears that people legitimately had at the time.
yeah,
Invasion USA is taking advantage of and exploiting those fears, and that's the difference between these two takes.
yeah,
So, I mean, you can't expect much more from Golan and Globus. You know, Canon is not known for its, aura of, its classic run of great Hollywood films and whatnot. But yeah, this is Golan and Globus just taking the fears of the time and just exploiting them and giving Chuck Norris another movie to be in because Chuck is Chuck, you know?
yeah. And Chuck Norris is just he's such a bore on screen. Like, he has no charisma. Has he ever
He's
had charisma?
he's supposed to be playing the stoic Rambo type, but he doesn't carry it because Sylvester Stallone is a real actor, you know?
Yeah.
And he does. Was this the birthplace of the Chuck Norris one-liners about how tough he is? Because you get that line where the guy says he's beating up a guy, and again, I don't even want to go into the scene. There's so much wrong with this film, and I could dissect 1,000 different points. We have other good stuff to cover. Um, but he's beating the one guy up, and the other guy comes in, and he says, "If you don't leave, I'm going to hit you with so many rights, you're going to beg for a left." And I'm like, was that the birth of the Chuck Norris is a tough guy one-liner? Because I
I
don't know.
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm curious. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to. Yeah, I'm curious to. I
I
don't know
mean,
if
I
I'm
believe.
curious enough to watch more movies of his to kind of figure out where it might have started, but I mean that is a good point.
I mean, I can say that I believe that Chuck Norris gets a story credit on this, and his brother is one of the writers.
Yeah,
So if you wanted to
yeah,
get Chuck Norris one-liners, you have the star of the movie as a story guy and his brother doing the writing. So I could certainly see that being a thing, even if it wasn't a thing at that point, they might have made it a thing here. And you're right, I don't want to go investigate Chuck Norris movies either, but
yeah.
I just found that curious, you know. And unfortunately, this is the one movie that does not have Jerry Goldsmith doing the score because that would have classed things up a little, Brian.
Oh yeah, I mean, but it is another movie where the score is just screaming, "Look at me, listen to me, I'm
Yep.
patriotic."
Yep. That it is.
Unfortunately,
100%.
it does not have the same level of quality as Jerry Goldsmith brought to his music. And our final film is another one scored by Goldsmith. He did the Rambo movies we talked about earlier. He does this one is 2002's The Sum of All Fears, directed by Phil Alden Robinson, who did Field of Dreams.
This is the Field of Dreams guy?
I think, if I remember correctly,
Oh my
yes.
God, I never would have made that connection.
No, he is very much a. He was very much kind of a journeyman filmmaker, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
he's not somebody who necessarily was doing. You know, he was not somebody who necessarily was doing. Um, well, he also did Sneakers.
Okay, that fits more
He
in.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, this Field of Dreams and Sneakers were basically his biggest movies they did. He was
Wow, I
also
had no
writer
idea.
on. He was also writer on All of Me, Rhinestone, Ghost Dad. That I'm sure he's proud of that one.
Jesus Christ, Rhinestone and Ghost Dad, two of the worst films ever made.
And All of Me, which is a damn good Steve Martin, Lily Tomlin
Yeah,
movie.
yeah, it really is.
Um, Goodness gracious.
What a bizarre
But
career that is.
yeah. No, Phil Alden Robinson. And the thing is, so this was after the Harrison Ford movies, after The Hunt for Red October and the two Harrison Ford movies. This was going to be essentially a reboot of the Jack Ryan franchise. And this is going back, I think this is the first book that Clancy had written with Jack Ryan
Yeah, I
in
was
it.
talking to my sister about this because we were watching this movie together, and I'm like, clearly this isn't just a younger take like they wanted to do that, but clearly this has to be an earlier point in the character's career because he's
Yeah,
already married in the two Harrison Ford films.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Ann Archer plays his wife in those, so I'm like, this has to be at the beginning of his career because he's just like an analyst at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so this has to be his first big adventure into espionage and the thriller thing. But yeah, this is I told you well, before we started recording, I wasn't expecting much out of this. I mean, and then I watched it last night. I was totally blown away. I loved it. I was surprised. I was surprised at how great a film this was. I think maybe because I'm not a Ben Affleck guy, that might have been why. But you know,
Yeah.
he's serviceable, and the cast in this thing is just it's star after star after star. Like you couldn't get a better
Oh
cast.
yeah, this is a fully loaded cast. I mean,
Yep.
it's got a lot of great people in it. This is in this time I'm going to give a shout out to the QAA podcast. They did a movie night episode on Some of All Fears early on in their Patreon, and and the reason they did that is because of the fact that Tom Clancy type narrative, pro-military narratives are very prevalent in when it comes to QAnon, and so this is a movie that is set up with the excavation of an Israeli fighter jet from the 70s that has a nuclear warhead on it.
Yes.
And the nuclear warhead is taken and it is sold on the black market. And this is basically about setting off a nuclear warhead in the United States, namely a championship football game. It's funny because of the fact that, like, if you haven't seen it, check out the 1977 John Frankenheimer movie Black Sunday.
Yep.
Because this movie did kind of remind me of that in a lot of ways. And apparently, the book, and I understand the change, and it really makes a lot of sense now. The book was originally about Palestinian terrorists.
Okay.
And so, needless to say, I think setting this up as this is a movie set. One of the things I do like about this movie is it's set, within. I do feel like it is kind of set within the time frame in which it was made. So you're looking at post Cold War dynamic between the U.S. and Russia, and I do like that aspect of it. And we have neo-Nazis, who are stoking a lot of fears, we have extremists working together, and then we have Jack Ryan, who's basically trying to figure things out. He has some knowledge of some of the players, but this is where he really does put himself into the orbit of the people higher than him, namely Morgan Freeman's character.
Well, it's not really so much that he puts himself in that orbit and that Morgan Freeman puts him in that orbit. So let's just quickly discuss the setup, because you said the thing about the bomb, right? So
Yeah.
soon after you get that information, and again, the fact that a nuclear bomb could be lying in the sand somewhere in the Middle East is absolutely terrifying to start off, right? So you got me there, right? So then the Russian president, because the Cold War's over now, no more premiers, that president, the Russian president dies, right? So the guy who's going to replace the Russian president, Morgan Freeman's pretty much sure he knows who he is, who's it's going to be, because he has an inside on the guy. He has an inside contact in the Soviet, well, in Russia. It's not the Soviet Union. So he picks up Ben Affleck, because Ben Affleck has written a paper about this guy, and he says, "You basically predicted this. Put on a shirt and a tie, and let's head over to Russia." Right? So while they're there, Ben Affleck asks a very important question. He says, "Hey, I got a quick question for you here. You're supposed to have 17 nuclear scientists here. There are only 14 on this list. What is going on? Where are these three guys?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
So then the thing is that those three guys have gone rogue, and they've been through a series of incidents here. They've been tasked to putting a nuclear bomb together that's going to be set up at a championship game in Baltimore that the President of the United States is attending, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, like, when I was talking to my sister last night, I said, I really didn't expect this to be this good. And she's like, well, the Tom Clancy movies are always good because they always have great writing, right? And they tend to draw really top actors. So between those two things, like, you have a really compelling story here. And you're trying to keep up with Ben Affleck as he's trying to trace what's going on here and find out what is going on. Where is this nuclear warhead? Where is it going? And then once it hits Baltimore, it turns into an entirely different movie at that. Well, not an entirely different movie, but it takes a huge turn because the bomb blows up, which
Yeah.
is just absolutely shocking. And there are a couple times when they show characters in the foreground and you can see the mushroom cloud in the background. Brian, it's terrifying. It's really scary stuff, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because this was one of the movies that was delayed because of 9/11. Like, this
Okay.
was originally supposed to come out a little bit earlier. I think probably sometime, I feel like it was supposed to come out sometime in the fall or sometime in the spring or something like that. Or maybe it was the fall, but it got delayed to the summer of 2002 because of 9/11. I mean, there were
Yeah.
other movies that had that happen as well, and understandably when you consider the subject matter. And yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that is so this is a solid movie. This is a really solid movie. I hadn't watched in 20 plus years, and I was very pleasantly surprised about it. I think the part of the reason why I wanted to put this one in there is because of the fact that, and we talked about it before, it is kind of an outlier from what we got from the 80s movies, right? I mean, it is not necessarily Cold War USA Russia relations, but there is tension between the two. You look at the new type of extremism that is political extremism that is coming in when it comes to neo Nazis and other terrorists, and you look at the threat of a nuclear bomb and what might actually happen if one were to actually go off. It really does set up this idea of it's this idea of intellectual, like, pitting both sides against the middle and making sure both sides attack each other while the middle is basically they're ready to take over.
So the connection that I made with this to the other movies and the 80s is that once the bomb goes off, then it's who attacks first.
Yeah.
Because some guys in the president's on Air Force One, some of the guys are telling him, bomb them now immediately. One of the guys is saying, look, we need to wait for a first attack. Then one of the guys said to him, what the hell do you think Baltimore was? That was a first attack. Meanwhile, Ryan is trying to compile information because he's convinced that the new Russian president didn't do this. Right?
Yes.
So the fascinating thing about how this connects to the 80s for me is that, okay, well, the Russians can bomb, I don't remember what city it was, St. Louis, Kansas, somewhere out there. But they wouldn't do that because they know we'll bomb them here, and then so it's a chess match between who's going to go first, right? Because
Yes.
clearly there's aggression now. This has been set off by a nuclear bomb. It looks like Russia did it, and we're gonna one of us, either our side as Americans or their side as Russians, is going to initiate this, and this is going to blow up the entire world. So the whole thing about the nukes, because remember in the 80s, the whole thing was we wanted more nukes than anybody. Everyone wanted the most nukes because the more nukes you had, the less people were gonna attack you. Well, because they
Yeah.
figured that you were gonna bomb them, right? So if we can
Right.
bomb 8 Russian cities, but they can bomb 15 of ours, we're not going to want to attack them. But vice versa as well. Huh? So
Yeah.
that was where the Cold War played into it, and it's really interesting to look at this as the results of the Cold War because you still have Russia in many people's minds as a potential fear for us because we spent 35, 40 years in fear of them. And then then you get to Putin and it's the whole thing all over again. It's like the whole presidency and the dispelling of the Soviet Union never even happened because now we're in the same state. You can call it the Russia or the Soviet Union, whatever you want. It's the same state. It's an aggressive dictatorship where they've been in war with the Ukraine for God knows how many years, and that's never going to end. So
Yeah.
it's now instead of Afghanistan, which they were in forever and that never ended, now it's the Ukraine, and it slaps right back to the 80s all over again, And this movie is like stuck in that weird middle place between the crumbling of the Soviet Union and the rise of Putin. So you have that whole middle ground there where, we were technically at peace with them for a while and everything was cool. And then
Yeah.
something like this goes down, it's like, oh no, here we go, we're right back to those Cold War fears all over again. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
a fascinating, fascinating movie. It's really well made. It's really well acted. And I'm like, okay. So in the moment while I'm watching it last night, I know there are other Tom Clancy novels with this character. I know I've seen Hunt for Red October and the two Harrison Ford ones. I'm like, they can't really blow up the world in this one, can they? Because that would
Yeah.
have, I was so caught up in it. I'm like, oh my. And then when Ben Affleck gets that message on the screen in the CIA or whatever it is, the Pentagon there that says the Russians are going to stand down, I'm like, oh, thank God. You know?
Yeah.
I was that invested in that movie last night.
Hmm.
So this was supposed to be the start of a franchise, was it?
So I feel like, yeah, I mean, I feel like they were going to reboot, kind of do a soft reboot of the Jack Ryan movies.
Sure.
Because, I mean, Harrison Ford obviously was getting up there age, so he didn't, plus it wasn't necessarily one of his iconic roles, and I mean, they
Yeah.
were still trying to get Indiana Jones 4 off the ground.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, yeah, I mean, basically it was, again, it plays into this role of this whole idea of IP and specific characters. I mean, after this one was moderately successful. I mean, this one did decently. It was in the middle of a May of Spider-Man and Attack of the Clones as well. So I mean, there was a lot of other stuff going on
Yeah.
this year that time of the fall. But I mean, no, I mean, and it was also, again, it was also Hollywood trying to figure out what to do with Ben Affleck and how to use Ben Affleck correctly. And I mean, the answer is, well, you let him direct and figure it out from there.
Yeah.
But but the fact of the matter is, it's like, no, they tried again a decade later with Chris Pine to do
Yeah, I didn't know about that until last night, and I have no desire to see a Jack Ryan performed by Chris Pine. I mean, he's a fine actor. I don't mind him. I like him in the Star Trek flicks, but I don't need to go there. I don't think.
I mean, it's decent. It's much more of, I feel like it leans, it's not, I don't think it's based on any of the books. It's just basically just trying to, do something with the character.
Gotcha.
And I mean, it's fine. It's, you can kind of, I mean, the John Krasinski series basically, I feel like probably overshadowed it considerably with how well that was received. But no, I mean, this is a solid movie. Yeah, I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised coming back to this one. It's like, oh, okay, this even is good. But yeah, I mean, it deals, and it also, this also points to the idea of, oh, the CIA is not necessarily as, part of the reason why this one, I think, is, I feel like this kind of works in the same vein, is this idea of, even though the CIA can seem to be doing some shady stuff, like, you can ultimately trust us to save the day. I mean, that's kind of how I've looked at, that's kind of how you can look at the Jack Ryan movies, the Jack Ryan character in this is like, you've got characters like you've got people like Jack Ryan at the CIA. They're going to keep you safe. Don't look over where we're doing some other shady shit. But
Well, like the whole thing is, and I think that James Cromwell, who plays the president, sums it up perfectly. What
yeah,
exactly what you're talking about? He says when he's on the plane and they're telling him, "Hey, we need to know whether you want to send the nukes or not at Russia," and he says, I lived my entire life wanting to be the president. This is my presidency.
Yeah.
And he's in a tough spot, and the whole thing is that, like, the approach to government is so much more nuanced in this film than it is in the two Rambo films.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot more
Definitely.
nuanced. It's a lot more layered, and I appreciate that approach because I don't think that any of the people in the American political, the president's cabinet and all that, Morgan Freeman, and you have Jack Ryan obviously and his team. I don't think any of those people are bad people or they're supposed to be evil. We just have a situation here, and we have to figure out whether we're gonna send nukes, which no one would have ever thought, or if we're gonna hold off and try to make sense of this.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was refreshing to see something where there weren't these cartoony villains stepping in saying, ha ha ha. So it was
No,
just a,
Nick, I will say, I mean, at least the early Jack Ryan movies, Hunt for October, the Harrison Ford ones, and then this, I mean, they do at least give us villains that are not cartoons, right? Like that, and outside aggressors that are not cartoons. I think that is an important point. I mean, Sean Bean's character in Patriot Games is still one of my probably one of the better villains I would say I've seen in a movie. I love that movie. I think it's great because of the fact that Sean Bean's character is does such a great job in terms of being a counterbalance to Ryan, and his vengeance toward against Ryan is what makes that movie so interesting.
yep,
And yeah, I mean, here even then, it's like we're also seeing the changing of how warfare is done in when it comes to America. And I mean, I'm sure that's part of why this did actually hit a chord with audiences after 9/11, because of the fact that it's like we had just had the most brutal attack on our borders since Pearl Harbor, and it was something that was all over the news, and it's like you couldn't escape footage of what happened on 9/11 for
yeah,
months and years afterwards. And I mean, that is something that I think is interesting with how this approaches it, and it is based on the idea of, well, intelligence and trusting what we find out versus what we feel like we know is going to save the world.
yep. I do want to say though, the one thing that I did want to tell you is that this is not one of my favorite Jerry Goldsmith scores. I don't think that it stands out. I mean,
Yeah,
it just seems like a typical, like, it's not a bad score. I don't think Jerry Goldsmith it could ever possibly have put out a bad score. But it just seems
right.
very run of the mill, and it seems like what you would expect out of a thriller. Like
Yeah,
all those nuances from, like all those nuances from Goldsmith just aren't really there. And I got to say, the Rambo soundtracks are much, much superior to this one in my mind.
I would actually agree with you on that when it comes to Goldsmith. It's like, as goofy as those movies are. I mean, I think Goldsmith's score, like, and I'm glad that Stallone, once he basically kind of took control of that franchise, he kept Goldsmith around for it.
Yeah.
I mean, and you do kind of have to figure, because when did Goldsmith pass away? It wasn't far. It wasn't long after Some of All Fears, because I know he did Looney Tunes Back in Action for Dante. I I think he
That was
did pass.
2003 or 4, I think.
Yeah, so he passed away relatively not long after this,
I
and
know he was dead by a couple of years after Looney Tunes Back in Action because he Joe Dante was part of that Masters of Horror series. And
Yeah,
one of the things that stands out on the two Dante entries in that series is that the scores aren't by Goldsmith, because
yeah.
Goldsmith passed away. And I'm like, you could
Okay, so
tell.
yeah, Goldsmith did pass away in 2004. So I
Okay.
mean, yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it. Look, the fact of the matter is, it's like he is. He's a composer like every other composer, where it's one of those things where it's like, if sometimes you do scores that are just very familiar, and it's like, okay, I've got ideas I can do for this. So yeah, I mean, and especially he was, especially a couple of years before his passing. I mean, I kind of get it. I mean, look, the fact of the matter is, it's like sometimes age does not necessarily help creatives when it comes to, plus he might have had other stuff dealing with at the time.
Look, it's
So,
not going to put any dent in my love for Jerry Goldsmith.
oh
I
no,
was just
not at
really
all.
surprised. I was just really surprised when I was listening to the soundtrack, because I'm like, this is just so not what I would expect when I see his name on in the movie titles at the beginning. So
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because of the fact that, I mean, a few years before this, he had done. He came in at the last minute and did a great score for Air Force One, which is another American U.S. versus Russia thing.
yeah,
Although that's more Russian extremists, not necessarily the government in general. But yeah, I mean, so that was it's. So no, he's still in some chops at the end. But yeah, I mean, this is probably one he might have looked at and gone, okay, I can do this pretty quickly. So yeah,
alrighty, well, Brian, we covered four films here today, and I gotta say, I always I say this every time I'm on, and I'll say it again. I always love when you invite me to come in. We always have great conversations. I think we go in depth on a lot of things that you might not get out of other podcasts out there when you and I get together. And
yeah,
my thing is that the Cold War stuff, propaganda in nationalism has been around forever, as
yeah,
long as films have existed. But, the fact that you have three films from the 80s that are clearly signs of what Reagan was, and then you get signs of, where we were in 2002, and propaganda, and, looking at how the action movie can address, the government and how the government acts in the military. I think that my take out of all is that, film can be used for some really powerful stuff, and we've seen on the same tone here with four different movies how nationalism can be pressed in one way or the other. You know,
yeah.
so
No, and I think the reason I wanted to do this episode, and I appreciate you agreeing to do this episode with me, because also it just was, it's, even if the movies are not that great, it's still a fun group of movies to talk
oh yeah,
about.
yeah,
Like, they're fun
absolutely.
movies. It's not like we're not talking about Roberto Rossellini and Rome Open City, or The Passion of Joan of Arc, or Dirty Harry, or Spotlight, or other movies that we've talked about in this series so far. They're just really serious in what they do. All of these movies, and part of the reason they are notable in this particular conversation is because they're inherently not silly movies, and they're inherently silly movies.
Yep.
They don't necessarily, as much as they want to seem to take their subject seriously, they ultimately do not, because they're first and foremost about escapism, about giving audiences something to be thrilled by, as opposed to asking questions, asking questions about these ideas and these subjects. And I think that's one of the things that, looking at these movies from a perspective of propaganda and what it says about American filmmakers and what American filmmakers and maybe what the American government wanted to have conveyed in these movies, it definitely, it's important to get that context. And no, it's always a pleasure, and we'll definitely have you back in the future. I mean, I love talking to you. Maybe we get back into talking about true horror again, or we talk about other stuff. I mean, we've had some great conversations on stuff that is not in horror.
I just do want to let your fan base know that we have discussed the future episode discussing my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie, To Catch a Thief. So that is.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, we will definitely get that done, because of the fact that is one of my favorites as well. And Phil, as always, thank you very much for joining me.
And thank you so much, Brian. It's a pleasure as always.
I want to thank Phil for joining me on the podcast. It is always a pleasure to talk to him. And that is going to do it for the first 5 episodes of the Fascism and Cinema series this year. We've covered a lot of ground. We've covered the idea of resistance to fascism. We've talked about the idea of the police state and state-sanctioned violence. We've talked about the way religion is used for oppressive purposes. We have looked at the responsibility of the press when it comes to speaking truth to power. And now we are talking about the ways in which action movies can be used to fuel propaganda. And we've got some more coming in 2026. I definitely want to continue this series. And this might be something that continues for a while, because there's such a breadth of discussions. We may have one more episode in 2025. I'm not sure that's apart from this series, but more than likely, we will likely see you in 2026. That's going to be it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema Podcast. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you to all of my guests. Thank you to everybody who listens. And thank you to everybody who's checked out the podcast, whether it's at YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, wherever you listen, whether it's patreon.com/Sonic Cinema, or whether it's my main website at www.sonic-cinema.com. Thank you very much.